Good evening, everybody. James Ramsden here. Welcome to the webinar. Thanks for joining us. Right on 8 p.m. That is Australian Eastern Standard Time, Melbourne, Sydney, Brizzy. And for all you people joining me from all over the rest of the country, thanks for making the effort. And we've got a couple from international tonight, so thanks for joining us. Okay, so just before we start, just want to make sure everyone can hear okay. Can someone just drop me a note in the chat section and to say you can hear all right? And as we always do, just a couple of housekeeping rules or guidelines. I encourage you to ask questions and also to play with your phones and computers during this to see what we're talking about. And if you want to ask a question, please do just write that in the note. And you'll see as my screen starts changing, it's because I'm checking to see whether we're getting notes in there at all or not. So if you guys can just put a little note in there, you'll either see your question box or your chat box. Just type a message in there, that'd be fantastic. You can hear okay. We are recording tonight, and we'll see that you'll see it being sent out to you later on as well. So that's great. Thanks, Peter, and thanks everyone else for making those comments. Thanks very much. All right, so let's get started. Also for tonight, the webinar will finish at about 8:30, even earlier if we're able to get through the material, but happy to keep going if there are questions and discussion, and things might come out of it. So let's get started. And we've got lots of people joining us tonight, which is terrific. All right, so just having a look at our intro, Google friend or foe, from humble research project to directory smasher. And the reason for this webinar, and I choose webinars really as we go about what the topics are, but we've had a couple of things going on recently which are quite interesting. One is that we're still finding clinics that are using yellow pages or directories. Hard copy book directories, and the evidence points to the directory, the hard copy directory, being of minimal use to the practices. And people have been asking, can you assess our spend on directories? So that's an important part. And the other point is that we had the AVAPM conference a couple of weeks ago in Sydney, which was a great success. As part of that, we had a program where we were getting people, with my petback hat on, getting people to search themselves online, and we've been teaching people how to do it properly. And when you do it properly, which we'll talk about in another session, you can see that for a lot of practices, their presence online is poor, particularly in the surrounding suburbs. So just to talk about that for a minute, most practices in Australia will be found when you're searching in the suburb that the practice is located in, and that's because the basic information that's been included by the practice online details that they're in that suburb. But in order for Google to understand that you service a larger area, you need to do extra work. And for probably 90% of practices in Australia, if you're a punter, a consumer, potential client standing in the surrounding suburb, you will not see that clinic online. So it'll become clear as we go through how important this is and how significant this is for business as we see the impact that Google's having on our behaviour, particularly around choosing local businesses. All right, a bit of an agenda for tonight, a bit of history of Google. I'm a big fan, and we obviously are entrenched with Google with our business in terms of it's where our business comes from. It's how we help our clients, our veterinarians, get business, and it's an ever-changing environment. A bit about how the book directory has declined, and which some of you will have experienced in your working time, but some of you here tonight will have had little experience with the book being powerful. Pokemon Go, I talked about that this week in the emails. Very exciting and relevant, actually, to practice. Lastly, you've got a new friend, Google, and it's important that we see Google as a friend, and for multiple reasons. And then finally, protecting and growing your assets. There's one little note about using your phones and talk, so get stuck into it and play around. By the way, if you have any, if you do want more information about how to search for yourself effectively online to see what people are seeing when they're trying to find you. And by the way most people search for their businesses online is a obscured view. When you do it the normal way, the way you're probably doing it, Google will deliver for you what it thinks you're looking for, not what someone who doesn't know your business will see. So before we get into the history of Google, a bit about PearPack. There's a lot of people here tonight who I haven't met, so thank you for coming. And PearPack is a company I created in 2001 with 4 guiding principles, which I'd like to describe because they're important to what we do. First of all is to teach pet owners about how to look after their animals better. And our business is fully content driven. Probably it's probably 50% of our business is about content. The second one is to reinforce the role of the vet as the leader in animal healthcare. It's important, particularly with just a second. It's important, particularly with increasing competition in the market, that the veterinarian is heralded as the leader in healthcare, and with the developments in technology, we're going to see that vets maintain their role as a leader, although they might be obscured by other services. Thirdly, highlight the impact of animals on human happiness. It's why most of us are in the business. And then make a useful connection between pets and a healthier planet. The important part about PearPack is that we have a measurement system. It's called VetLab. And without you having to read this slide, what we do is we test and measure our online actions, and we do that by working with practices around the country where we make changes to their online performance and see whether it makes a difference. And it's a scientific approach in terms of we have a hypothesis. We say, well, if we optimize Google business listings, for instance, is that going to make a difference? And we make the changes and measure it. Most of the changes we've made over the last 3 or 4 years have been positive. Some of them haven't, and which has been good to know. And as a result, we know how much business the online marketing generates, and also we can see that it's growing. Here's a bit of example, a couple of clinics, real clinics, with the growth in their performance, and this relates to how important Google is. Clinic A grew the website traffic and phone calls 300% in 18 months. Clinic B grew their traffic 216% and calls 436% in 4 years. And that's a lot to do with the work that we're doing, but it's also a lot to do with the way the consumer is changing the way they behave, in particular the way they relate to Google. A couple of results. I'll just focus on the websites here. We've got results for newsletters, Facebook, and email newsletters. But with the websites, our websites have generated an additional 26,400 new client phone calls. That's not just clients, that's new client phone calls in the last 12 months. Righto, so summary for tonight. Google began as a research project, and its success means more than search. It's actually about changing our behaviour as consumers, and as a result, it's changing the way vets operate. So a good thing to do is think of it as another client you need to attend to. We're talking about Google. It's an active process. It's not passive. I'll come to that a bit more. Most practices' involvement online is passive, so they have a website there, but they're not looking at the detail of what's actually going on or improving it. And this client, which is Google, will refer its friends to you if you do the right thing. Just one sec. Okay. So here's a bit of history. And just before we do, I'm just going to check. By the way, if you have questions, just drop them into the question section, and I'm happy to answer those either now or as we get through to the end of the preso. So a bit of history of Google and how it got to today. This is a really brief summary. Google's got about 50 to 60, maybe 80 products, which is extraordinary. But 1995, Larry Page and Sergey Brin met. They met at Stanford. They began a thing called Backrub in '96, which is a research project, and that's what I referred to in my emails, into online search. It was basically looking at the mathematics of how the internet worked and whether or not they could develop a search algorithm that was clever, and this is where they developed this concept of PageRank from, which they trademarked or protected. 1998 was significant. The co-founder of Sun Microsystems invested $100,000 into a business that wasn't yet incorporated. 1999, so just a year later, the first company dog, Yoshka, came to work, and there's a picture of Yoshka. Animals are pretty important to the people at Google. I thought there was a nice connection with what we do. 2002, big time, AdWords was launched. AdWords is Google's revenue generating tool. 2005, absolute game changer, Google Maps, and that's relevant to Pokemon Go and vet clinics, as we'll see later. That was created, by the way, created in Sydney, and the Sydney office is huge and built around the Google Maps creation. So that's a great little thing for Australia there. 2012, Gangnam Style, that South Korean song, first video to have 1 billion views, and I think the only one so far on YouTube, and YouTube is a Google product or owned by Google, and the second biggest online venue online. So Google owns and controls the 2 biggest online venues in the world. And 2016, Google My Business is launched, which we'll talk about. And we've got a live counter. So let's have a little look at what's actually going on with Google in 2016. If I just escape from here. And I think you'll be able to see this. This is live. This is a number of searches on Google today. And that's 4 billion and something searches. So something like 35,000 searches a second, something like that. So that's pretty cool. You can see that powering up there. Look, really the point is that the growth and extent of Google is phenomenal. From 2 guys mucking around in the back of a container, a temporary container at Stanford, trying to work out an algorithm, through to being an all-pervasive and business-changing tool. I'll show you a couple other stats about Google in a minute. Here is the searches per year growth. So you can see it's just obviously an exponential rise. Phenomenal. And look, none of this is strange to us, but the important thing is that because we've seen the impact of online search, but certainly I think we forget the significance of how Google's changed the way we do things, and that's important. Just a couple other stats, if I can bring them up. This is a Google report, economic impact report, which shows that $165 billion worth of economic activity in the United States generated by or assisted by Google. But the key one here, 97% of internet users look online for local products and services, 97%. And you'll see another stat coming up that it's something like 88% use their phones. So it's really important when you're making assessments of where you're going to spend your marketing or advertising money, to think clearly about where that money is going. So for instance, if you're going to spend money in the environment of Google and it's a Google sanctioned action, it's a pretty good bet. It's a good thing to do as long as it's run effectively, because most of your clients and potential clients will be using it. If you're using it in an environment outside of Google, in an outdated, like a hard copy directory system or a directory system that's not Google, then you really want to ask yourself, is that a good use of money, and do the measurements. All right, back to our preso. No questions at the moment? Okay, cool. We'll keep going. So the decline of the hard copy directory, there's a little picture of the hard copy directory up there. I remember I graduated in 91, and vets were spending a lot of money on directories. It was the third biggest source of new clients or practices. So the first one was word of mouth, the second one was drive-by, and the third one was the hard copy directory. In fact, that was the only directory available. There were some splinter group directories around, particularly in capital cities, but there was one main directory. And it wasn't unusual for a practice to spend 10 to 30 grand a year on the book. So you got a free listing, and then there were these options to ramp it up and have color ads. Now, there weren't a lot of practices that were measuring the value of that, but the ones that did, the ones that shared their data with me, at the time, it was an important part of business generation. Now, what's happened is a couple of things. Google and mobile technology have changed how we search locally. So I remember the first time someone asked me what a fleet controller recommended, and when I told them, I said, that's great, I'll go and Google it. And then, so just the concept of actually searching online and being able to find other places to compare was really the first impact of Google. But the mobile technology has made a massive difference, because what you find, as you know yourself, you actually look things up as you're on the go, and it's really important that the businesses you're looking for, or the type of business you're looking for, is presented in a way that you can find them on your phone. And you can see today 88% of consumers use their mobiles for local search. All right, so that brings us to Pokemon Go. Now this is really the pointy end. Actually, just before I get to Pokemon Go, I just want to show you something which is quite phenomenal about how much, how far Google's come since 1995. Now this is Google's own personal history, and you can see it starts in 95, and this one goes up to 2014. And you remember that slide I showed at the start, how we talked about AdWords in 2002, Google My Business 2016. I just want to show that the significance of the number of products they've got in here. There's Backrub, the first one they generated. And every time you get to something that's highlighted, it's most likely a product. So let's just whiz through. There you go, Rentalplex. And I don't know what half these products actually do, but it just shows you the scale and connectedness, and this is relevant to Pokemon Go, because Pokemon Go came from a separate company that was actually, the guys were bought by Google, and now it's been spun off again. AdWords, toolbar. Let's keep going through. Picasa. Maps. Lots of work on maths. Google Earth. Analytics. We haven't talked much about analytics, but analytics is the back engine, back reporting tool that we use for all our websites. It's just a phenomenal tool, and it's something that is useful if you want to see how you're operating. Gmail. A lot of us use Gmail now. Remember, Hotmail was big, and before that, AOL. YouTube. Anyway, I'm not going to stop it everywhere, but you just scan through. Look at all the action in this business has been phenomenal. 2010, 2011, and we come up to today. Well, 2014, I should say. And what was the last thing they got there? Okay, Android Lollipop. There you go. So it's been a phenomenally productive organisation. So Pokemon Go released July 2016 in Australia, New Zealand and the US, taking the world by storm. If you haven't played it, I'd get into it. It's a lot of fun. It's quite interesting because what happens is once you load it up, they tend to seed Pokemons in your building or near you, which really helps you get off your backside and get out there and have a look. And you know, I put this in the email because it was a good way to get your attention. But there's a really fundamental connection here. As I said before, we've watched Google grow, but we don't feel the impact of things like when Google Maps arrived, people are going, whoa, that's amazing, now we just take it for granted. When something like Pokemon Go comes out and everyone starts changing their behavior, you can suddenly feel the power of how significant Google is and what it's going to do potentially for our businesses. So this was from the people that actually created Google Maps, or they were part of the Google Earth mapping system. And their mission, it's a company that's owned by Google, by the way, their mission is to help people interact with the world using new technology. Obviously, that's what they're doing. So the reason this is important for practice is maps is at the base of how most people find your clinic today. So when they're out there with their phones doing the search, and it may well have been from word of mouth, they might have seen you, but they're going to go to their phones to do it. And we've seen that 88% of people are going to use their phones, and 97% of people are going to search using online, Google, for local businesses. So pretty much everyone is going to be searching. They're going to be using maps on that system as a way to find you. And there's an intersect here because I've already said to you, and it's really important to repeat this, but almost every practice in Australia, 90% of practices are invisible outside of their own suburb. And you can change that. You can change that really quickly, but it requires an active investment in your energy to actually do it. So the last thing here is just think of how people will now find your clinic. Hey, maybe you can put some Pokemons in your waiting room. That is not such a silly idea. A mate of mine who runs big events for large corporates was rung up by the Victorian government last week and said, can you help us seed some Pokemons into some particular areas we want people to go to? So that's it. So what I want to talk about is your relationship with Google. And I think a good way to think about it is that Google's like a friend. And this relationship must be watered and fed. If you have a mate who you haven't seen for 3 or 4 years, it's really hard to keep up that connection, even though, you know, when maybe you get back together and it's all like old times. But friendships need to be worked on. You need to put effort in, and that's how it's healthy for you, it's healthy for the other person, and that's how good things happen. And just a couple of notes here. Google wants to understand you more, and there's a reason for this, because the more Google understands what you do as a practice, then Google trusts you more, and with the trust, Google will introduce more of its friends to you, and its friends are consumers. So Google's primary objective in life is to make the search work well for the consumer. I'm using the word consumer to categorize anyone who's searching for something. And if you can just imagine you're in Google's shoes, you have some potentially competing interests. You could look after your consumers, or you could look after your advertisers, or you could look after third-party services who fiddle with websites to make them come up first. And in order of importance, the consumer comes first by a million miles with Google, a million miles, and that's why people use it. Second are the advertisers, so the people that, like a vet clinic who buys AdWords, that's secondary priority. And thirdly, and in fact a long way behind it, are people who make money by fiddling with the way Google search results work. So on that third group, you would have been approached by a lot of companies who offer to improve your search rankings or say that your search rankings are no good. Google is actively working to make it harder for those businesses to work. It's also making it harder for other directories to work. So we've just talked about Google being having replaced hard copy directories. Any other directories you can think of, and you're probably spending money with them right now, a lot of you will be, Google is making it extremely difficult for them to operate. And as a result, if you do the analysis, you'll find that the directory is not worth using, these other directories. The other point about this slide, about talking about it being Google being a friend, is that most practices, as I referred to at the start, have a passive relationship online. So they're so busy being a vet, or busy with what happens in the practice, that they have put a website up, but they haven't put any effort into maintaining the website to make sure it's working properly, or to look at what Google's doing now, or really analysing it. So with a passive relationship, Google doesn't have a lot of information to go on, and that's as a result, people can't find practices when they're outside of their local area. So let's talk about what you can do if you are going to get more active in terms of protecting and growing your assets. And when I talk about your assets, I'm talking about your online assets, and these are significant assets now as Google becomes the main driver for traffic coming into your practice. The first one is your domain name. Let me just check if there are any questions on that now. Just drop in any more questions if you'd like right now. Yes, that's fine. We are recording this. You'll get a recording sent out at the end. Okay, yes, I will. I'll just make a couple of comments now about how you become a friend with Google. So if I just go to, this is a slide, the question is about this slide, how do you become a friend with Google? Google has said that if you're a business in a local community, what Google wants to see is you putting regular, good quality information on that website that relates to what you do. And in terms of how Google works that out, it won't divulge it. And there are a lot of businesses out there, a lot of services out there, SEO companies that will tell you they can improve your search rankings by doing artificial actions. So artificial link building, you might have heard of, is one. And it used to be very powerful before Google realized that it was skewing the results. So coming back to the original premise, Google wants to deliver the best website for the consumers in that area. So from a veterinary practice point of view, what that means is making sure we'll talk about the structure a bit more, making sure your website's set up correctly, but in terms of content, putting regularly on your website good quality content that relates to what you do for your local community. It's actually very simple, but it's quite hard for practices to do it because you're busy doing other things. So let's go to our assets. So domain name is your most important asset. You may not be aware, but it's the domain name that Google has a relationship with. Google doesn't have the relationship with the website. So if you have a current website attached to your domain name, which if you have a website you will, you can remove that website, and as long as you do it properly, put another website onto that domain name, and Google will see you as the same person. There's no change. So let's talk about domains for a minute. Some clinics have various different domains. It's very important to have a .com.au name, and that's not so much from Google's point of view, but from your local community's point of view. If someone is looking for a business and they see anything other than .com.au, it gives them, if only a moment's hesitation about who you are. A very good example of a big hesitation is the .com. Quite a few practices still have used .coms, and if you do that, the perception from the consumer is, well, they're not local, or are they local? You don't want any hesitation about that. Remember, you're a local business, and you're providing a service to a 3 to 4 kilometre radius in terms of urban practices, and a bigger radius if you're in the bush. So a domain name is vital. If you had your domain name for a long time, you've been running it with a website, doesn't matter how crappy the website is, that will have done wonders for your relationship with Google. So being there for a long time is important. I've got an example of a clinic who's had a website for a long time, and they had some really good articles on there about pancreatitis, and they got in very early before other people were providing it. And if you look at their results, people find these articles about pancreatitis from all around the world. They're very high up, probably number 1 or number 2 for those search results. And it doesn't really do anything for their business, because you might have someone in the US looking up their pancreatitis articles, but it just shows you how if you do the right thing and have a long relationship with Google, Google will show you to more and more people. The second area is structure. The way this website's actually set up is very important. And you might have heard of metadata or meta tags. This relates to information that you can't see on the website, but when you do a search for a vet clinic, you can see it. And let's have a little look at that. In the last couple of minutes, I'll show you. If we've got a couple of minutes in, I'll come back to that. So getting that structure set up right is really important because it helps people when they're searching for you actually choose to come to your practice. Content, we'll come to that a bit more in a minute, is king. So in terms of your relationship with Google, you've got to have your domain name and website set up, but your content is the most important part. And it's the thing that clinics struggle with because you just don't have the time to put it together. Usability means, can a consumer use the website effectively? And so in a vet clinic's case, what's the most important thing? The most important thing is being able to see that you're a local vet clinic from a consumer point of view, and then ringing you. And ringing you from the phone, from your phone screen, is vital. Now, Google actually has started assessing websites, and if you can't contact the clinic effectively, you'll be penalised. If you've got a really good, usable website, you'll be actually pushed up the rankings, up the results. And last thing is tracking, understanding what your website's doing so you can actually improve it. And the two things that are really important to track are traffic, which is the number of people or users, the number of people coming into your website, and you get that from your analytics, and how many people call you. In the absence of online booking and other services, which really are not significant at the moment, the number of people that call you is vital. So if you have those two numbers, you can decide whether you need to get more users or whether you need to convert more of those to calls, or both, and start working on it. If you don't have those numbers, you're in the dark and you won't know whether the work you're doing is making any difference whatsoever. The next thing you need to do if you're going to build your relationship with Google is actually use Google tools to your advantage. And the two main tools that you want to do in addition to having a website are Google My Business and Google AdWords. I'll show you a couple of pictures of them here. Google My Business evolved from Maps once again, and you can see this over here on the left, Google My Business listing. You can see the maps in the background there. This is a new service from Google which is combining a whole bunch of other tools they've been playing with, and we've talked about how many different tools Google actually has. Cut a long story short, if you're searching for a vet clinic on a phone, there's a very good chance you'll see a Google My Business listing, because remember, who controls what comes up on your screen? It's Google. And they've decided they want business listings to come up. And in the testing we did in VetLab with our test clinics, if it's set up correctly, it will generate an extra 100 calls a month, which is just phenomenal. It's almost double the calls they're getting already from online. So it's very significant, and you really need to have a good crack at it, look at it, and get it done properly. The second area is Google AdWords, which is this middle screen here. You can see this little ad at the top here, Vet Clinic Eltham. That is an ad, and it's a service that Google sanctions. It's their revenue earning system. If someone clicks on that, Google gets paid. It might be $1, might be $1.50. And it's really, really powerful for getting people to see your practice outside of your own suburb. And you can set that up in a flash and run it, and it's a service that we run for most of our practices. And if it's set up correctly, and you're not wasting your money on for instance, having ads appearing on the other side of the city, you'll generate calls at about $5 a call, which is our benchmark, which is fantastic. So it's a very, very good service to have. And the last picture here is a mobile-friendly site, which is in relation to usability. You must have a mobile-friendly site, and that means a website that adjusts to different screen sizes, because if you don't, you'll be penalised. Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to help Google and your clients, and you can do this together. the reason you do that is you use direct-to-client communication. So you use your email newsletters, and you use community tools like Facebook. And the important part of this is linking your email newsletters and Facebook back to your website. So the last point here is you want to invest in content across web, email, and Facebook. And invest means you need to learn how to do it yourself and invest the time to get it done, or get someone else to do it, like PetPack. And we help our clients actually get that done. And here's an example of our content management plan, which gives you an idea of what's important. So, for instance, a typical scenario with vet clinics, your practice, if you're not doing content management, is you'll have nothing going onto your website generally. You may be doing an email newsletter, but unlikely, and you'll have a lot of content on Facebook. Now, the issue with that is that Facebook generates very few phone calls for practices, so you need people coming to your website for them to call. Conversely, if you're just doing an if you're just putting content into your email newsletter, it goes to your clients, which is great, but it's not residing on your website, and so it's hard for new clients to find you. And so what we recommend is you actually coordinate all three together using a content management plan, which gives you structure and allows a practice to actually achieve good quality content management. So just to reflect how PetPack works, we help practices by getting new clients, so using websites, Facebook, and search tools, so helping maximize those Google tools, getting people into the clinic, so they're actually ringing the practice and making bookings, and then once they become a client, enhancing that existing business by communications through email newsletters, directing them to the website, and using social media to build brand awareness and issue awareness in the local community. So that's the end of our presentation. I've actually gone over time. If you time for a cuppa or a beer or a glass of wine, thanks very much for coming. It's been a great pleasure. Really enjoyed it. If you have any more questions, please drop them into me. And there's one question here. I've got time just to answer one question about Google My Business. So let's go back to that slide. So Google My Business here is the section on the left here. And the history of that is that when Google created Maps, they thought it was a great idea if they could put some business listings on it, which they did. And they ripped those out of old school directories. We talked about, hard copy directories and online. There were a lot of online directories when Google started with regards to maps, and so that information was populated. Now, that information is often wrong or out of date, and for most vet practices, they haven't updated that information, or they're not sure how to do it. The second part about Google My Business listing is that with the rise of mobile, and we're tracking now that clinics are getting at least 50% of their calls coming from mobiles, and the Google stats are that 88% of consumers are using mobile to find local businesses. So, it's very high. Google sent an opportunity to actually put that Google My Business listing front and center on phones. However, it's changed a lot from Maps, but it's changing, and that means that the content you need to put in there has changed. So I recommend you get someone to help you do it, and it's a service that we will do. If you're interested, you can let me know. And once you've got it set up, you need someone to keep an eye on it to make sure that when Google makes a change to that structure, that you make the appropriate change to your own practice. All right, good. Thank you for that. And on that note, I'm going to say good night. Thanks for joining me. And if you have any further questions, you can contact myself or Danny Badu, who's our National Sales Manager, 0413 738 901, or contact Danny directly on danny@petpack.com.au, or the office, info@petpack.com.au. Thank you very much, and have a lovely evening.